And everyone, welcome. Oh, look at this. Look at this little combo.
That's our secret guest.
The darkness. What am I doing? Oh, I know. There we go.
That's our anon.
There we go. Hey, happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday. What's up, guys?
It's awesome.
How's it going?
Can't wait.
I'm ready to decode some human behavior. It's always fascinating talking to Matt, man. I want everybody to know what's inside Matt's mind. What's been like Matt's journey is so fascinating, and I love. Now when I'm digging around and I see something that's questionable, I send it to Matt. I'm like, "What do you think about the cadence of this voice and the behavior of the?" And totally. He's like, "This is inauthentic," and I'm like, "I thought so, but I just wanted to be the expert."
Matt, I'm so glad you're joining us today. Everyone, Matt Cubbler is an amazing man. First of all, Matt, when you came on the podcast, it's one of my wife's favorite podcasts that I'm almost 200 episodes in, and our episode together was incredibly powerful for me, and she was crying. That was really beautiful. And so thanks for coming on with Aaron and I today. It's exciting to rock it with you.
Well, specifically about that podcast, you got me to talk about something that I'd never, and I've shared my brother's story. I mean, obviously in a book, but on stages for the last 4 or 5 years, up to 600, 700 people in the audience. And I usually tear up during the story, but it's the first time I ever told the story about my brother carrying the picture of me in his wallet. And that would be like his initial conversation with people was, do you want to see a picture of my brother? Man. And that I never told that story. And I don't know why I never told that story, but you got that out of me, and that hit me like a fucking baseball bat to the head, dude. It was like I was not expecting my reaction to that. And it just was so authentically pure. How it really caught me off guard emotionally, and it was very cathartic for me. So thank you for that,
brother. Thank you, and thank you. This is the before we're going live, I was kvetching about my everything I was going through today, and just the energy, and just feeling like things are off. Like it felt like that scene in Dumb and Dumber when like our pets' heads are falling off, and like everything seemed to be off a little bit. And remembering moments like that, and just all this dark energy, all the lower vibes can't hold anything together when we, are vulnerable and we're authentic and when we're sharing our light. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, Matt, let me ask you this. After the fact now, do you have any regret feeling that emotion, sharing that in a way that you didn't expect to?
No, I love it. No. I mean, those are the things that make my life have value when I can, and it doesn't matter if it's in front of live people or through the internet. I love having a moment, whether it's a moment of joy or sadness or whatever, because it's part of our existence. It's part of our journey. It's part of what makes us who we are. And if you can connect, people ask me all the time, how do you still have such deep emotional reactions to the loss of your brother who died 32 years ago almost? And my answer is I would be upset if I didn't. His presence in my heart on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, and from your podcast with the rabbi, Lucas, remembering is what typically you had forgotten it, and now you remember it. And truly remembering is having and living it, and constantly having it be a presence in your life. And my brother is a remembrance as a constant presence in my life. And his loss is a memory of love that was implanted in my heart. So it's not I don't feel sadness that he's gone. When I cry, I feel love in my heart, because it reminds me of how amazing those 18 years I had with him were, and his life was to so many other people. It's not, I wish I had him back. Of course I do, but that's not what I'm feeling. What I'm feeling is that deep emotional connection and joy through tears that I was able to share a life with somebody like that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And it's a moment of truth, regardless of what we label the emotion.
Right.
Oh, it's a moment of sadness or a moment of joy. It doesn't matter. It's a moment of truth.
Hmm.
And it feels like more and more we're walking around hiding our own truth. And what I always say is people are hiding the same things from each other.
Yeah.
Why? You know, we shouldn't say that because there's shame or guilt.
Hmm.
But if you hide that person's hiding something very similar from you. Why are we hiding
Right.
this depth of humanity from each other? And we practice all this small talk because we think we have to. Or how you doing? I'm good. You? Yeah, I'm good. And that's it.
Right.
Is that truth? I don't know. I don't think so.
Hmm.
So what's
Yeah.
the point of living, right?
It's funny, but you say that like people will, and I don't know how it is. I mean, Aaron, you were in Hollywood for all those years, and Lucas, you've had one of the widest varieties of lives, from your humble beginnings to all the things you've done throughout. You're a pastor, a journalist,
Yeah.
a survivor of a horrific trauma, like all these things that happened to you. But
Yeah.
people don't understand. Like when I ask people on my show who is whatever, Aaron Scotty or Lucas Mack, I ask that question because I truly want to know who you are and who you think you are, who your truth is. But everybody has an image of who they think I am or you are, and that's the part that I think is limiting that connectivity. Is we all have a preconceived opinion of who the person we're talking to is, and what they bring to the table, what their value is. And when I say go fuck yourself to somebody, they're like, oh my God, you're the guy that cries on stage about his brother. How could you be that crass? And I'm like, well, you don't fucking know me. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's like I'm everything. We're allowed
Yeah.
to have a range of emotions, a range of perception, a range of experience.
That's
And
right.
we don't need to hide it. We don't need to hide behind shame. Let it
Hmm.
fly. Fear is an energy. Anger, it's all energy. So we can choose to live in the anger over and over and over, or we can choose to release it and move through it and
Yeah.
feel it and then, move through into something else. But we don't have to hide it. The more we hide it, the more it bottles up. And I learned that the hard way, growing up in Philly.
Yeah.
So
Matt, there's so much. Just even recently, I've been watching police officers and different clips and videos, and there's just so much going on right now. We titled today "Decoding Human Behavior." Before we get into like specifics, walk us through your background again, like for those who haven't yet to hear your story professionally from military career to police officer. What is your background and training, and then we can get into how you see human behavior that it is today.
Yeah, I've been in public service for 32 years. Graduated high school when I was 18, had an appointment to the United States Coast Guard Academy, chose to enlist in the Army to piss off my stepdad. Mission accomplished. Didn't go to college. I still have never graduated college, and I went in the Army and was an Army intelligence analyst. Essentially a decoder. I was a cryptanalyst and signals intelligence. So we've heard that a lot during the whole initial onslaught of the post-election. There was a lot of signal intelligence references with hammer and scorecard and all that kind of stuff. So that's my background in the military. I'm a Gulf War veteran. So I was in from 89 to 93. So that's the time period we're looking at. Got out of the Army, immediately got hired as a cop, and I've been a cop for 28 years. And during my law enforcement career, I've worked in just about every facet of law enforcement, from uniform patrol to undercover narcotics to 12 years on SWAT. I was 4.5 years right after 9/11. I decided to do a little shift, and I became a United States Federal Air Marshal, one of a few thousand that were hired out of 1 million applicants after 9/11. So I always while the job itself wasn't necessarily the greatest job in the world because it was very difficult to manage the bureaucracy of the government and the ineffectiveness of the government with your passion to keep America safe. And then also, the fact that I was married with a 5-year-old and a newborn when I started that job and was gone all the time was difficult as it was. But what I learned was I was one of the best out of, or at least slipped through the cracks, maybe, I don't know. But 1 million people applied for a job and they only took a couple thousand.
Yeah.
And I left there in 06 after I couldn't take it anymore. And I've been a uniform cop ever since, with a little bit of time on SWAT when I first came back. And I realized that the SWAT team I had left, because I went back to my old SWAT team, wasn't the same SWAT team now. So I could only stay there for a little bit, and I ended up getting into a shooting, which got me in a little bit of a pickle. And then I just decided it wasn't worth it for me. But I'm still in law enforcement today, and all in all, 32 years of service to our country in many different capacities.
Well, one of the things in law enforcement, I'm sure, and I want to hear your thoughts, and Aaron's the same thing probably for you in Hollywood and acting. It's not what's said, it's what's not said while it's being said. That is what is truly being said, and it's like,
right, the subtext.
The subtext. And for me, like growing up in the house that I grew up in, I could feel like a deer in the woods, like a stick cracked, and you're like, something, we got to go right now. I have to move, and they could come in like, hi, and you're like, that's not the energy. I really know it's about to happen. And I have taken that in journalism, being a TV reporter. I've taken that in my life now in coaching, and why I'm not gaslit by all these veneers, facades, grins, and smiles and words. But as a lot, like, what is your perspective on just what is the training of law enforcement to pick up on the real truth versus the presented truth?
Well, there's a couple precursors to that answer. Number one, law enforcement is woefully undertrained when you start. And I can go on an entire 2-hour tangent on the cause and effect of hiring certain types of people who may not have a proclivity to do the job of law enforcement. And then secondly, the lack of time requirement to truly understand the nuances of law enforcement before you send somebody out on their own to make life and death decisions that affect not only the person's life that you're interacting with, but their family and also yours and your family. So there's and then your profession as a whole, how it can impact that. So, the last 4 years and, since 2015 specifically, when the Ferguson incident happened, law enforcement has been under a microscope for its perceived abuse towards people of color. I say perceived because statistically it's just not true. But the realities are, it doesn't change the fact that there are people in law enforcement who should not be cops. It doesn't mean they're racist or hateful or anything like that. It just means they're not wired to do this job. It is just like in the ministry. I believe law enforcement is on some level a calling.
Yes.
It's not you didn't choose between accountant, insurance salesman, and cop. Like that shouldn't be. It does happen that way, but it shouldn't be how it happens.
Right.
So I will say that the training for cops to understand and identify and analyze and then react to subtle changes in body language and human behavior is not there in the training component. They may give you a little block on, understanding nonverbal techniques and shit like that, but when it comes to actually employing it and understanding it and becoming good at it, it takes decades of work. But I will tell you that there are people who are intuitively great cops from the start. They may not know the fine-tuning things, but you can just see they got that thing that allows them to make decisions, to make the right decision. And sometimes that's because of what they lived prior to becoming a cop. I think that exposure, that period of time, between birth and say 22 years old, 23 years old, and most people become cops, those are probably the most vital years in the development of a good law enforcement officer than anything that you can do on the job. Because then if you relied on simply your exposure as a cop, depending on where you're a cop at, will dictate how often you're exposed, right? The level of depth in which you're exposed. So there's some places out in the middle of Iowa that, the cops don't see much of anything as far as the more violent stuff or more intense stuff. And then there's places like Chicago where they see it a couple times a night. So I think that the pre-cop life is vital. And for me, that's where I learned everything, not knowing it, but that was my training ground. That was, 22 years of living that I was able to condense and then redirect that knowledge towards my job.
Right, because words don't teach, experience teaches. So all the words in the world, we can hear it and it could go, whew, but until we have that experience, it doesn't really settle in, right? And this is also, it's interesting you say that you compare Chicago to Iowa. Anytime we turn on the news, we're seeing Chicago constantly. We're not seeing Iowa. So that's why everybody thinks that's what cops look like.
Right.
But they're also in a way different environment and have to prepare and react a little differently than the cops in Iowa. And like you said too, the one thing, one of my best friends from back home is also a former Marine and a cop. And so when all this stuff started coming out between the two of you guys, I just think of you guys and a couple other police officers I know that are just so beautiful souls that truly want to protect and serve. And they get put into a box, right? But there are individuals out there that, like you said, just aren't equipped to handle this job, or they become an officer for the wrong reasons. Maybe they were bullied in those 20 years leading up and they want revenge. And now you give them a certain amount of power and a weapon. And those are the people that we're seeing on TV. And then they say, those are cops. All cops, this, right? So how do you feel like you're dealing with that during this time as we go more and more? I always think I see these signs outside of homes that say defund the police right now, right? And I just think the anger part of me is like, well, they shouldn't be allowed to call 911. But that's also not true and not fair, because they are expressing their true feelings about what they know. And I know for a fact that if somebody was robbing that house and they called 911 and the police show up, I don't know about all police because that's a general statement, but I know if you and Mike showed up to that house and you saw that big sign out front that was a big fuck you, you'd still go in there and you would do their job, your job. You would protect them. You would serve the community, even though they're spitting at you.
Yeah, it's the only job where you're required to do that. Outside the military, it's the only job where you have to serve and protect regardless of the person that called. And and I think I talked about this on your show, Lucas. I did an audition for a TED talk, and the theme was chaos, and I made it to the top 30. They were taking 25 and I didn't get selected, but I talked about the chaos that goes through not only the person that's calling 911, but the cop that's responding in a high stress environment. All the things that are happening instantaneously within a matter of a second or two that has to be processed and then addressed. And the fact is that no matter what, a cop, and not even a bad cop, not a bad meaning, not bad meaning corrupt, but bad meaning just not good at its job,
right,
will go into danger.
Yeah.
And that's more of a wiring thing. That's an expectation thing. And there may be some, I'm going maybe hesitantly, but I know if I don't go, I'm going to be called a coward by my peers or whatever the case might be. But everybody goes, and the level of effectiveness when they go is a different conversation. But the fact that you're walking into that building where bad guys are, or the fact that you're walking into that alarm for a building that never has an alarm go off at 3:00 in the morning and the back door has been broken open, and you don't know if the bad guy's in there, but you go in there with your flashlight and you search and you're yelling, police, show me your hands, police, whatever. And you don't know what's going to happen. And your biological functions that are happening are going, the fight or flight responses are like, get the fuck out of there, but you're like, I got to stay. And that's a real thing that every cop at one point in time, whether they do it consistently or not, I can't say as a generalization, but I know every cop has had to go into a situation like that. Yeah. And that the outcome of that situation isn't unknown until it's done.
Right.
So somebody could pop out of an office, scare the shit out of you, and you're not prepared to handle the initial surprise, and your gun's out anyways because you're going into an unknown situation where there's potential threat, and you shoot somebody. And that person is now dead and they didn't have a weapon. So now What's the next thing that happens after that? And people forget cops are human. It's just a fucking job, right?
Yeah.
It's an employment, and the expectation of perfection is tremendous, and it weighs heavily on decision making. And in the environment we're in today, where every move is scrutinized, you're starting to see, and the defund the police movement is the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And 2020 was just one giant fuck you to law enforcement. It's causing cops to stop putting themselves out there intentionally. They still respond to their calls, but for me going out and finding crime, or going out and heavily patrolling an area that I know have had a lot of drugs, whatever, those things are reducing because guys don't want to put themselves in a position where they're going to be judged by a Monday morning quarterback for actions they took on the job. And I think that's where the hard right, or hard left, I should say, turn was made that is going to negatively impact the citizens of our communities.
What do you think about, as you're saying that, I'm thinking a great psychological operation against police officers is to demonize and then de-incentivize, perhaps, or de-inspire, whatever the word is. Like, yeah, they're not going to intentionally seek out crime, but then give them the sense that they're still enforcing law with this mask fiasco. And what I don't understand, and truly I think about this quite often. If the police force said no, our country, to the degree of tyranny, would be free. If the police force said we're not enforcing unconstitutional orders, go fuck yourself, then there would be no issue. But maybe that was the psychological operation, is like the cops needed something to enforce because they felt like this sense of lost power, and now they're enforcing things. Because last time I checked, I've never heard of a mandate officer. I've only heard of a law enforcement officer, not a mandate enforcement officer. So what do you think? I don't even know. I feel a lot of frustration with police right now, who I supported dearly and stood for and called for the honoring of heroes that go into conflict instead when everyone else is running. And now I'm seeing these law enforcement, quote unquote, officers become the same type, that taking similar action to people that killed my family members 80 plus years ago in Europe. And I just don't understand what the literal fuck is happening.
I got an answer for that. So I was one of those ones that stood against. Pennsylvania has been one of the top 5 restrictive states in our country. I publicly, I had a rather large social media platform until a couple months ago when I got cancel cultured, and permanently, and or at least until I'm no longer a cop. And that was caused by my platform that I had. But what they went after me for, because I have constitutionally protected rights, was the mask mandate and the lockdown mandates that our governor placed on small businesses. I was a small business owner who lost his small business due to the governor's mandates and the lockdown orders. And I at least had enough forethought and foresight to see that the path to return was going to be long and arduous, and that it was going to be a bad business decision to stay open. So I immediately cut it down, and I shut it down, and I said, we're not coming back, because I knew that a year and a month later, we're still going to be in the same spot we were a year and a month ago.
Right.
So, but what I did was I was publicly promoting businesses who did have the ability to at least manage their businesses, because mine was in the gym business and we were closed forever. And I knew that was going to be one of the last things that was allowed back open. But like a small business restaurant, that they had options to pivot and maintain at least their ability to stay operational. So I was promoting businesses that were doing that. I was promoting businesses that were not mandating masks, using my platform for that. And I was promoting businesses that, when the governor was arbitrarily just shutting down restaurants for in-person dining and only allowing takeout, which was in some cases, cutting the knees off these small businesses.
Right.
I was promoting at their request the businesses that were going against the lockdown and staying open. I was promoting them by attending and patronizing, but also by putting out posts on their behalf. I found out that I almost nearly lost my job. I almost was arrested. They went to the Attorney General's office, and they were going to file criminal charges against me for inciting lawlessness, and then potentially fire me for conduct unbecoming of an officer, and on top of the issue with the inciting lawlessness. And the reason being is they were saying, as a police officer, I was telling people it was okay, and I was promoting it was okay to quote unquote break the law. And granted, I've never seen a law, but apparently there are acts like the Health and Safety Act that, as a police officer, I have the ability to enforce a law on. But I've never once been trained on it or know what any of these laws are. Apparently, under one of the laws under the Health and Safety Act, I violated a criminal statute. So I can tell you that the reason why cops are doing what they're doing is because of that threat. Now, they can go pound a giant Sahara desert with a I will never enforce that law.
Yeah.
I will never arrest somebody for that. I will never anything for that. And that's a hill I'm willing to die on because I believe strongly that the government has overstepped and they can't make me. I do have officer discretion built into my job description. So they will never make me do that. But there are many guys that, I don't identify as a cop. I am a cop, but that's not, if somebody asks me, what do I do for a living? It's probably fifth on the list of things that I do, even though that's my full-time job. Yeah. Many guys, that's their only identity. I'm a cop. So what else would I do? And when that threat of, whether it's suspension or whatever, that, not every department's run by somebody who thinks like us.
Right.
And the governments, if you're working in Pennsylvania, most of them are democratically run. Right. And and it's just everywhere. There's no breath. You can't rise up for air and catch your breath. You're being squashed. And so while I wish there were more guys like me, not everybody has the entrepreneurial spirit and the understanding that I can, you get rid of me. First of all, I'll win the lawsuit. Number one. Number two, I'm going to be okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's missing in a lot of guys, and that confidence in themselves to be able to provide for their family and continue to thrive instead of being a victim of losing their job and then losing their identity.
Well, it's understandable. You put so much work into becoming a cop. It's the same thing I was saying, I went through the whole Western medicine thing and all these doctors right now that are doing what they're told and just whisper down the lane. And I have compassion for that. I say, think about going to medical school for 12 years, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. Are you ever going to question that training? I'm blown away at all the doctors and scientists that are coming out questioning the narrative because they're questioning their entire existence. And it's the same thing with the police officers. I mean, you spend your whole life and you go through all that training, and then you start to identify as a cop. If you start to question that, you pull at that one thread and the whole thing unravels. Who am I? Right. And it's an important thing to do. It's an important thing to ask. When you get to the other side, you can see that in hindsight. But before you pull at that thread, that's a scary thread to look at and even consider pulling.
No doubt. It's for me, I stopped, probably, I don't know, 2008 when I ran across New Jersey in honor of my brother. Was when I had my visceral moment and I broke myself down physically and mentally and emotionally during that 78.8 mile run, where I realized who I was and what my purpose was and what my value was and the impact I could create through running across New Jersey or writing a book or mentoring a kid or sharing my brother's story or whatever the venue was, the impact I could have that had absolutely nothing to do with my job title. And my job, what I found was my access point to helping people. That's really, I flipped it from being, I'm a cop to I wear a uniform, which allows me access to people to impact their lives positively. And when you can make that paradigm shift from it being who you are to what you do with it, that's, I think, was the turning point for me. So, but not everybody is able to get there, and not everybody is willing to put that. I ran across New Jersey. I have rheumatoid arthritis. Like, I'm not supposed to run. I have arthritis everywhere in my body, and and I didn't know if I physically could do it. And I certainly couldn't train to run 78 miles. So I said, "Fuck it, I can do something once." Like, there's nothing that will stop me from doing it once, and I did it. And that's when you go. And there's a video, and I forget what the movie. I think it was When We Were Giants or something like that. It's about a youth football program, and there's this one scene where the football coach asked the kid to come out onto the field. He was talking negatively about their chances of winning against his team, and he has him bear crawl, so on his hands and feet, not on his hands and knees.
Yeah, that's the best. Yeah.
And he puts a kid on his back, and he
Yes.
has him blindfolded, and the coach is just in his ear, like, 5 more step. And at the end of the day, he went 100 yards.
Yeah.
He told him he was only going to go 20. And it's that when you take away that fear and that visualization, that thing that's in front of you, that hurdle that stops you because it looks too scary, and you just rely solely on your own gut grit and instincts, that's when the unthinkable is attainable.
Right.
And that was just it. I've always used that when I go to schools and talk to kids, I use that video every time, because at the end of the day, unless you know what your very best looks like, unless you've ever given your very best, and I did one time in my life when I ran across New Jersey, I physically I passed out on stage. I had 6 broken bones in my feet when it was over. I had a seizure, full body seizure at mile 40 on the side of the road. That had tractor trailers splashing puddles of water on me on Route 322 heading down the Jersey Shore. And I had nothing left, and that was my very best. And then I know what that took. So everything I do from this point forward is going to be measured against that.
Wow.
Right.
And you need to know that.
You can't unsee what you just saw.
Yeah.
But sometimes we're forced to see that. Like, for me, it was forced. We don't want to pull at the thread. But I think that this is what's happening collectively now, because we've chosen ignorance for a very long time. I mean, you hear people all the time say, "Oh, this is corrupt," or that, and but what are we going to do? You know, we are more powerful than that, and we weren't stepping up to the plate to find out. And for me, it was a physical thing where I was like on my deathbed, and I had to make a decision to see what I was capable of. And when I went down that road, I started pulling at all the threads. And as uncomfortable as it was in the beginning, I'm so glad I did it. I was thankful through tears, saying, I don't know why this is happening, but I know it has a purpose. I know it's in my best interest at some point. And then I became a father, and I was like, oh, I now know why I went through all that, because I wouldn't be this person if I didn't. And I think that's what 2020 has brought for us collectively. We are all collectively facing our mortality, collectively facing existential decisions, facing division, which is so unnatural. And we have to ask ourselves, how do we change that? We have to go within. And you see, especially, it's no accident that 2020 was a political year, right? Where the divide came and everybody's looking outside themselves for someone else to save them.
Yeah.
And what happened? Everyone got burned. Everyone, both sides, all sides, everyone got burned for looking outside themselves, which is, again, and it will continue until people just go, maybe there's something inside me that will save me or help me, or I can grow. Maybe I can take that responsibility on. And I don't need someone outside myself to tell me who I am. And it's not an easy choice to make, but we're getting to the point where we're no longer going to have a choice eventually. Ignorance is no longer an option.
Right.
So as traumatic as this time has been for a lot, it's also very necessary. And I hold space knowing that it's in everyone's best interest. I don't know how. I didn't know how it was in my best interest specifically. And I'm still coming into learning every day. I get like a little wink from God, a wink from the universe saying, this is why. And I go, wow, it's beautiful. So I don't know how everyone else is going to experience that, but I know they will. It's just a matter of time,
Right.
That whole ignorance thing you talked about is funny. And my mom, well, I wrote this in the book that my biological father left when I was 9 months old, and his relationship with me and my brother was intermittent at best. Not a bad man, just incapable of loving and being a father.
Yeah.
But I would always ask, why can't he commit? Why can't he be the dad that I want? Why can't he be all in as in my life and be that person I needed? And my mom would say, your dad doesn't want to see what he doesn't want to see. And she gave an example. When they were driving home, they met in college, and they were driving home for a weekend or whatever. And my dad's car was burning oil, and it was like black smoke billowing out of the back of the tailpipe. So rather than address the problem of why his car was burning oil, he took the rearview mirror off, so he didn't have to see the black smoke behind him.
Whoa!
What a great metaphor for life.
And that's that's the way the world has been for so long. It's like, we know it's burning, but if we don't see it, then it's not as bad as we think.
Well, that's how we were raised as men, right? Like, man, no cry, suck it up, be a man. We know everything. Imagine a woman trying to tell us directions. No, I got it. And we'll just drive around in circles. Just out of stubbornness.
Yeah.
It's the height of stupidity. We've just been trained. We've been trained to think a man was something that it's not. Love is mushy and weak. Vulnerability, you're showing weakness. No, the opposite is true. Vulnerability is strength. Our emotions are our superpowers. And I've shared this with you. I don't know if in one of our podcasts or offline, but I think us being from Philly, we are surrounded by this anger energy. Philly fans are angry. I think there is so much bottled up potential waiting to be unleashed. It's just misguided love, and it's coming out as anger. Because in order to show love, we break balls or we tease, and it's like, oh well, if I don't break your balls, I don't like you. So if I'm breaking your balls, it's just because I love you. It's like, but why do we have to do it? Why can't we just go, I love you?
Then love me more. Really break my balls. Show me how much you love me,
Why'd you kick me in the nuts? Because I love you so much.
Yeah, that's right. That's what I always tell parents that, oh, you want to justify hitting your kids because you love them? Well, then you don't love them enough. You really got to beat them to death. Show them how much you love them.
Right.
It's so ridiculous. The
only way to break the spell is to really point it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Lean into that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
It's funny. My best friend Toby, he was my roommate all through the Army, my 4 years, and lives out in Missouri. And he's the greatest person I know. I'd die for him. But we always end our text or phone calls with "in a gutter," and we always say "I love you," but in a gutter. And he's basically saying, we're basically saying to each other, no matter where you are, no matter what station you are in life, no matter whether you're rich or poor, even if you're lying in a gutter, I got you.
Wow.
And that, when you have that, and I just got chills.
I have to, yeah.
When you have that connection and that ability to connect, that willingness to tell someone you love them and have that level of commitment to their happiness as a participant in their life and a producer of things that make them happy, that and brings joy and value. Those are choices.
Yeah.
And
there's so much power in that. And people don't realize I was neglecting that all my life because I didn't know what love was. And I had a hard time, even through marriage. I thought me and my wife, it was love. It wasn't love. We were coexisting because I was afraid. I didn't know how to give or receive love, even though I thought I did. I was romantic and surprised and try to be creative and stuff. But sitting still and being open and vulnerable and sharing love, eye contact, deep connection
Mm.
could be uncomfortable the way we grew up.
Yeah.
But when we get through that and those moments, I mean, it's hard to sustain, which is why I think a lot of this stuff is happening. You know, like this high vibration, if we're not used to it, it's hard to sustain. And that low vibration is what we know.
Mm.
It's the discomfort that we know. But being in that vibration of love, I mean, sometimes you really got to take a break from it. It's like a muscle that we have to rework.
Mm.
But the time to start is now because it is powerful. And when you're in that vibration, the entire world gives you everything that you want.
Hmm.
But how are we to know? You know?
It's a wild time right now where I'm directing this. Everyone,
I love it, dude.
I
I
really
love
like
it.
counts. I'm like, okay, I'll put myself in that one box right there.
I feel like I'm watching the Super Bowl. He's like getting the editing room and
Oh man, it's experiences. Someone just wrote a good experience is still a choice. It became a better teacher when I figured out success is so much stronger to help young people grow. It's still a large part of what I do, help people succeed. That's beautiful. And I'm not sure who wrote that. Oh, Fran. That's great.
oh, Fran, of
Yeah,
course.
Fran.
It sounds like Fran. Thank you,
Fran,
Fran.
you're awesome. So this whole concept of, and Aaron, you said it right. It's I feel like this dog, like coyotes. I know 3 people whose dogs have been killed by coyotes, and all 3 of these people in the course of like 10 years have told me their dogs died the same way. One coyote baits the dog and gets the dog's attention, and the dog comes to the coyote, and then the other coyotes come behind, and it's the coyotes that come behind that kill the dog. And even as I'm sitting here right now, and today's been a while, and I feel all this like dark, low vibe energy, and people, I feel like that's the coyote, and the power is to not engage that frequency. The power is to stand in sovereignty and to stand in love and not feel ever that we have to respond right now. And I think that's when we're in fear, we feel like we have to respond to fight or flight. But when we're in our own power, we can take that pregnant pause and like, it's interesting. I'm even watching people respond to police officers on these videos, and they respond right away as opposed to treating them as a human being and being like, and taking that breath and actually creating that calming response. Or I don't know. I mean, I have not been in that.
Well, they're reacting, right? They're reacting in the moment. And it's
Yeah.
like, if they take that breath and just ask, okay, this impulse reaction, where's it coming from?
Mm.
Does it serve me? And does it serve that person?
Right.
And if the answer is no, then what are we doing it for? We're doing it out of conditioning, doing it out of fear and anger. And again, that anger, if it's bottled up, we're projecting old stuff onto the person in front of us,
right,
who has no idea why.
Well, that conditioning you just talked about is key for everything. People like, racism from whites to black is taught. Everybody admits that at birth we're born pure, right? That we don't have racism or hate or judgment at birth, and then over time, depending on how you were raised, those things get created inside of you.
Right.
And I think that works, right, and it works for everybody. So when the person who's acting like a jerk off on a police incident and is responding the way they're responding, they were conditioned to do that. Just like the cop who comes across as an authoritative tyrant from the jump, rather than first starting, building it up and increasing the level of his aggression verbally, and he starts off at a 10. That's a guy that has no background in understanding how to interact with another human being, and is falling back on his power of authority,
right,
to inflict someone else to submit, and then you have this conflicting battle of conditioning that doesn't communicate, and then we end up with front page TV stuff of somebody being shot or a cop being killed. Like, right. So that's where we end up. And I think when it comes to understanding human behavior and people's tendencies and reading body language and understanding intent, those things are all intuitive, that the people who have had the most diverse exposures in their culture have branched outside of their conditioning zone,
Right.
are the ones that are the most easily able to properly read another human being and deduce whether or not they're at the, they're lying, telling the truth, what their intentions are, whether they're authentic, whatever. Those things all happen because of that. But everybody, I think, intuitively has the ability to do that. And I think that's what, when you're talking about 3D to 5D transition and
right.
and the energies and the vibrations and all that's what that is. It's just whether or not you're in tune to that, and how you become in tune to that.
Slow down, quiet, breathe, meditate, because you start to feel. I mean, I started to really notice. I started to ask myself, why do I walk into a job, my stomach's in knots, and you say, oh, I feel like your body's talking to you. That moment, like when you shared that story, and then my whole body got the chills. That's like I felt your truth, right? Or if you could be walking down the street and your stomach just kind of turns a little bit. You just ignore it, or you can go, oh, maybe I should turn the other way. Maybe there's something behind me. We have those instincts. We have that intuition, that sixth sense that we're told is just a movie, and they do this a lot, obviously. But the more we slow down and tap into that intuition, the more it'll guide us.
Yeah, Matt, what do you... Talking about intuition, what, like, I know we've talked about Michael Jaco and whoever he is, but he does talk about intuition quite a bit, and it's a great word to bring back into the mainstream narrative of intuition. And I think that's kind of what I was starting with when I was talking about it's not what's said, it's what's not said when it's being said, and it's that knowing, that intuition. Do police officers get trained, or I guess the answer probably is no, but it should be what humanity's trained on. Because I'll tell you, I was talking to, we had company over the other night. They're just incredible couple. Kind of been mentoring me for past couple years. The husband, their son's a Top Gun fighter pilot on an aircraft carrier off China right now. Just cool people. And I was telling them how the system works, because the wife was still believing, like, if someone says praise Jesus, that they must be a Christian. And I said, actually, they know that you think that way. That's why they say praise Jesus and God bless you and let's pray. And you think, wow, awesome, they're on our side. And I'm like, that's how easy. Think of how easy. They didn't have to show you where their bank accounts. They didn't have to show you anything. They just said a couple words and we bought in. But if you were tapped into that intuition, or read the energy, or actually lived what Jesus said, you can tell a tree by the fruit it bears, whether that fruit be evil or whether that fruit be good. It doesn't matter what people say. It's a matter of what the results are when they are around you, So I don't know what do you think of all that?
Well, first of all, cops are not trained in their basic training. Like, it's a 2-hour block or whatever. Like, it's nothing that's going to resonate.
Right.
There are trainings that you can go to that, if your department's willing to pay to send you, you can go to them, that are more advanced and bring that out. One of my good buddies had him on my podcast. Russ Hiddle owns a company called Dark Horse Law Enforcement Training, and it's basically they do drug interdiction on highways, and just understanding like drug mule behaviors, and when you initiate a car stop, body language, understanding breathing, and the lip, mouth dry, like all those things that you're looking for to find out if somebody's being deceptive. That would then take you to the next level, which was, okay, let's get a dog and do a sniff of the car, and then like all those things. And then if it hits, okay, where's the hidden compartments? Like all those things. But understanding there definitely is training for law enforcement for that kind of stuff. But you got to have an interest for that and a want for it. And then I think it should be mandatory, but it's not. But through experience on the job, you start to know when you got burned. You start to, you replay. That's one thing cops do, is we replay incidents over and over again, and what if it and tabletop it and understand, okay, what could you have done better or differently? And There are other officers there. What could they have done better or differently? So that happens frequently, especially when we're on SWAT. We would do that a lot. But for me, I have a unique set of circumstances, and why I'm very good at what I do is because I grew up with a brother who was severe stuttering and autistic, and couldn't tell me anybody really what he wanted without severe struggle. So I was able to learn all my life, because I basically was his protector he was 3 years older than me, but from the time I can remember, from the time I was 7 or 8 years old, that I sort of took on the role of the older brother. And so just being, with him as much as I was, and understanding what his needs and wants were, using his body language and his level of excitement or anxiety as my indicator of if I know that he's anxious about something, what are the things my brother's anxious about? So I sort of knew where potentially this was coming from. And then I was able to deduce, knowing about the time and place we were in. There's so many variables that go into understanding human behavior and body language that you have to take into account. It's different if you're sitting in a church than you are if you're sitting on a car stop at 3 o'clock in the morning in a dark alley. Things change. They could be the same person in both environments, but how they act and how their body language is different. So understanding time and space and place, and understanding body language, understanding that someone's going to be more anxious when you have them pulled over and they're guilty about something, or think that they're going to get in trouble and get a ticket. So you have to take all those things into account. But in the essence, it's intuition. It's that feeling of this feels right or doesn't feel right, or something is wrong or something is good, or whatever that energy you're feeling is then taking that as your baseline. And where your read starts is key. People want to read body language as if it's a this, then that, then this, then that equals that. And it's not that. There are micro expressions that you can look at based on certain behavior patterns and stuff like that, and understanding someone's personality profile and all that. You can study all that. But at the end of the day, the environment you're in and the moment you're in, a lot of those things are going to be a given based on that environment.
Right.
They're not an anomaly. And it's the anomaly you're looking for in the environment you're talking about.
Well, I think this is a good time to share a theory I've had that's actually become a reality. And then my Navy SEAL buddy, Larry, who you heard on the podcast, he backed it up. And I always had this theory I don't even know what it's a theory. It was kind of a joke, but if someone weirds you out, it's because they're a weirdo. Normal people don't weird you out. Only weirdos weird you out. So if someone gives you the weird vibe, it's because they're a weird person, and you got to trust that. And I was joking around to Larry when I first met him, and he's like, very serious back. Yeah, well, women get raped because they tell themselves, no, I need to shake it off. I'm being too paranoid. And that's what happens. He goes, instinctively, we know if we're in an elevator and someone gives us the vibe, it's because they are a predator, and predators get off predator vibes. I'm like, dude, that is so interesting. It's like that basic. What you're saying is energy doesn't lie. If the energy is there and it gives you a weird vibe, it's because there's a weird something. It may not be from them, perhaps. Maybe it's the coyotes behind while the coyotes there getting your attention. I don't know, but something in that situation isn't kosher, as they say.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're in constant communication all the time.
Always.
And we are the only ones that use words. Nature's always in communication. Animals know. I watch my dog every day. We go to the park and there's a different dog, and his behavior is different based on every dog that comes. Some dogs, he immediately is like jumping and playing and chasing, and they have certain movements where they like each other, they're going to play. And then there's others where he's tentative. It's all energy. They're not talking words. You know what I mean?
Wow.
All of nature is in constant communication. But the words we use are spells, right? Because that's how we create a word, by casting spelling into an auditory sound.
And I heard in 5D, we don't speak as much. It is more telepathic, but telepathic is a little bit of a nuanced word. I think it's just more energy of like what the energy is.
Like we've all walked into the house. I mean, we're all married. So, I mean, like you've walked home after a long day and you walk in and you just know some shit's weird, right? Something's off, something's wrong. You don't know what it is. And you're like, is everything all right? Everything's fine. But it's not fun, right?
It's not a different person, but the environment feels different.
Yeah. That's right.
But it's that energy that is that first initial. You didn't have to hear anything. There was no conversation. You walked in, you're like, something's off.
Right.
And that's real. Like I always, I've been on quite a few life-changing events, and the energy always preceded the event.
Dude.
There was always, there was times when I'm just running and gunning and not paying attention. I have my mind somewhere else, or it's close to the end of my shift, or whatever the distractor is in my brain, that I didn't pick up on the energy immediately. But in my replay of the events, the energy was there every single time. And then the times when I'm locked in and focused, and I talk about it when I'm talking about training self-defense or boxing or shooting or being in a shooting, that it's like a golfer in the 18th green who has to get a birdie to win the Masters, and there's 500 people lining the tee box. I know Matt Cubbler, would hit the first one, I'd toe it, and I'd knock the first person out to my right, right, with the golf ball. But somehow the golfer hits it right down the middle. And when you talk to a golfer, he's going to say, I don't see those people. It's just, I see nothing but where I'm hitting the ball. And it's that level of focus that allows them for all the energy shifts and dynamic shifts to really resonate and guide you through a high stress situation. It's when you can get into that zone, that's when you sense and see everything. Like I was in one shooting, and I can tell you every picture that was on the wall in that room where it happened, and where they were at and in what order. Like I wasn't even paying attention to that, but I was so locked into my environment that everything stood out. And the rounds, I could count them coming out of my gun, and I knew exactly how many I shot. I knew the pacing in which I shot them. Like it was very surreal. But that's when you're dialed in, and your confidence level in what it is you're dialed in for is super high. And I think the more confidence we get in understanding how the energy and the intuition that we're feeling in our hearts and souls, get more confident in that, the more easily and readily available the understanding of what they are becomes.
That's like the moment in the Matrix, when Neo is dodging the bullets, right? He had to put something on screen, but what they put on screen represents exactly what you're talking about. It's not that he was, able to just slow everything down and like the way we would think, but it just represents that energy of like it's happening before it's physically happening. It's happening in the non-physical first. They've done studies on the heart intelligence, right? Where they watch your brain and see what lights up, and they'll show pictures. And like they'll show a picture of a murder scene or a teddy bear or something loving, but the heart would respond 5 seconds before the picture was shown to the eyes. So like the fear would light up or sadness, and then the picture would show up of like a death or something like that. Or then the love would light up, and the picture would then show up 5 seconds later of two people hugging at an airport. So the energy comes first, the non-physical comes first, and then manifests into the physical.
Well, there's no doubt about that. That's a legit, the energy is always leading. And that's, and if you're not embracing, like we are a instant gratification society, right? The humanity is, we need to have that instant gratification. It's no different than, you sent me the meme yesterday, I guess, with they're going to start, Krispy Kreme's going to give out free donuts to everybody who shows that they've been vaccinated. Right. It's that instant gratification. I got mine.
Right.
I need that.
I know exactly what to tap into.
Of course.
And if you don't know what you're looking for, you're going to fall for it. You like free donuts.
Because we're into health. Because your health is the most important thing.
Stay inside, out of the sun, eat your donuts.
Num. Aaron, you woke me up to this, that they put out the energy. What did you sent me this like when we first met, or maybe it was on the first podcast we did together, is I can't breathe. And then sure enough, a few months later comes the mask. Yeah. And all that energy preceded.
Coincidences, right? I mean, the coincidences are mathematically impossible.
Right.
And it sounds insensitive You're like, oh, how dare you say that? But from an unbiased perspective,
Yeah.
just look at it. Look at what's happening around you.
Mm.
And if that was an isolated incident, then maybe it would be a coincidence. But
Right.
that kind of thing is happening constantly.
Mm.
Let me ask you this, because I think both of you have more empathy than I do. Just, I'm going to probably venture to bet that's true. In your experiences, in understanding those that are more in tune with the energy and vibrations around them, do you find that the people who are more pragmatic are more easily, I don't want to say trained, but woken up to the potential of the energy and vibration component to their joy and happiness and their overall life success? Or is it the people that have more connectivity to their essence, the empathetic component of their soul, that have a greater probability of being quicker to open up to that?
This is a great question. I think those who think they're pragmatic are actually not. And those who have meaning the ones who I've seen are awake are pragmatic, but they are rarely connected to their soul. How do I say this? The ones that I would think would be awake are not awake. So they're not connected to their soul, meaning you can only awaken if you're connected to your soul.
But they are connected to their education, and they're very, very smart.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But I think the empath, because we feel it so intensely, we have to find a way out of this pain. So you start to ask questions humbly, not thinking you know it all.
Right.
I mean, one of the things, it might sound like I think I know what I'm talking about, but only because in a moment I find something and I go, wow, this, and it sounds like an absolute statement in the moment, but that's my journey of discovery. But at the end of the day, what I do know is we know pretty much nothing.
Right.
And we're here to discover and explore.
Right.
That's the one thing I do know is we don't know. We're exploring, and my journey is different from your journey, and your journey is different from your journey. But that's true diversity.
Right.
If we could embrace those differences, then we could see the whole world through the eyes of others.
Right.
But we're taught that diversity is the color of our skin, and we are meant to put people in a box, go, oh, you're this, so you go there with those people, and you're this, you go there with those people. And we're missing such a great opportunity to see the world through the eyes of others, through that beautiful diversity.
Mm.
And I think the empath feels so much what's going on around them that we just really start to ask more questions. And we start to look for a deeper meaning instead of thinking we have it all figured out. You know, for me, it was more of like the street smarts that got me here.
But maybe it's because I would say you're pragmatic and you're an empath. Like I would say I'm pragmatic and an empath, but then there's the ors. There's the people that are pragmatic and I'm like, how can you not see this? But they're not empathetic. And then there's the empaths that don't want to look at the facts and walk down the logical if then. Well, do you not like the then? Either do I, but we have to change the if then. Like these word games. But maybe it's the and. Because Aaron, I would say you're pragmatic and you're an empath. You're a pragmatic empath.
I think what I've found.
It's a work in progress, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't always this way. I was just holding on to what I was taught to be true for as long as I possibly could, because we want to fit into our surroundings.
Right.
That's part of the peer pressure is their biggest weapon right now. Peer pressure using shame and guilt.
Right.
So I'll give you an example.
A really hard spell to break,
I don't feel empathy. I feel, let me rewind. I can appreciate the sorrow and pain that someone goes through from losing somebody. I truly do appreciate that. But when I'll give you an example, that shooting that happened yesterday didn't even remotely impact my life. Like there was nothing, there was not an emotional response to 10 people dying, even one of them being a cop, because I understand that the world is fucked up and shit like that happens every day. So in my mind, the overall view of what happened doesn't impact me. Now, if I got to know each one of those individual families personally and got to hear their pain and their sorrow, just like somebody hearing me for the first time, they can empathize with me losing my brother because maybe they've lost somebody they love. But from a generalization standpoint, I don't have enough room in my heart and brain to absorb all of that evil and sadness into my soul.
Yeah.
Conversely, I am super in touch with my spirituality. I'm super in touch with my humanity of who I am and what my value is on the time that it's been given to me. I'm super in touch with the fact that the legacy that I leave is 100% in my control. And someone told me this, and it's one of the things that drives me daily. And the reason why I explore so many different things, because I want to have a breadth of knowledge that is so diverse and wide that I'm limitless in the ways that I can impact the world. But someone said you die twice. Once when they put you in the ground and you take your last breath, and the second time when they say your name for the last time.
Yeah, right.
We're all going in the ground.
Right.
That's happening. But I refuse to allow anybody to ever forget my name. And I'm going to do things that are so impactful. And I don't know exactly how that's going to be yet. I just know that I'm open to everything and that I see opportunities and that doorways and pathways of opportunity to connect and improve not only my life and my family's life, but other people's lives exist for me. And I think it's that's where I don't want to say empathy lies, but I am so connected to the realities of life and the limitlessness of our lives, but yet the terminality of it.
Yeah.
And that, how do I do it in this time? I've had a dream, and Lucas, you and I talked about this. I don't know if it was on the show or if it was on or off air, but I have always had this dream that I die at the age of 53.
Right.
And I've been driven to accomplish as much shit as I possibly can, because I don't fucking know if I'm dying at 53, right? Who am I to say?
Right.
But you pointed out, Lucas, maybe that's just almost like a symbolization that I start a new life.
Yep.
I was just going to say, but what kind of death is it?
Yeah.
And I've never
died.
Like
Right?
I've never seen myself die in my dream.
Hmm.
I just know that would be like, there was this feeling that I no longer was, that's where that ended.
Wow.
And like, I never had a dream I was killed in a plane crash or fell off a building or whatever. But I always had this feeling that I'd die at 53. And when you said that to me, it really hit home, because I'm like, that's a fucking vantage point I never looked at.
Right.
That's so cool. I will say it's interesting. You were saying you don't have a connection to yesterday's thing. I've interviewed as a journalist two people who my first time ever interviewing someone who lost someone was a mother who accidentally ran over her 4-year-old. Accidentally ran over her 4-year-old child at a car wash that thought the kid was in the lobby and backed the car. It was a self car wash, and she backed up and killed her kid in complete accident. And the fucking news, I went to her house that day and she let us in, her and her husband, and they sat there. We couldn't even talk. It was unhuman. It was inhuman. And hence why I'm not in the news anymore. But there's and that was the first time I ever experienced that. And let me finish this with the second person. The second person that I interviewed, her neighbor took a hatchet to 8 of their neighbors up north of Seattle in 2008. And both of them, I have reflected back on those two people. One, obviously, was a child. She accidentally did it. One, it was a neighbor who knew this guy for many years. But there is a cadence with both of those women, happen to be women that I interviewed, that I recognize. And when I see these other things, these other people, talking heads or being interviewed, they don't have the same cadence. And the cadence is like their body and mouth is moving, but they're somewhere not fully in them. And I don't know how to describe that. It's like they're not really filling their body. They're talking, but it's almost like they're leaving their body. It's a weird. It's like if you've seen Doctor Strange when she punches Doctor Strange or whatever, one of those Marvel movies, and his like soul flies out of his body before his body. Like that's kind of the feeling I get when I interviewed these people. And then I look at this. Yeah, this is what happened. Like, sorry, it doesn't pass my sniff test, and perhaps I'm only sharing this and I'm not denying anything. It doesn't even matter. It just doesn't pass my sniff test. But also that you are empathetic, and perhaps you're really empathetic, so there's no empathy to be found in that story. Perhaps I don't know. And I
was actually going to comment on that same thing.
Yesterday,
because when you said that, I don't feel it. Unless maybe I knew those people. But my question was going to be, do you think it's possible that it's because you know that it's going to happen again tomorrow, right around the corner, and the next day? It's just, how many times can you put yourself through that knowing that it's coming right back around, because this is the way society has continued to allow the stories to be told? Because the media closes the aperture on our existence, right? This is the aperture on a camera, and they just show us this. But if we open the aperture to see all the surroundings, that's how we broaden our perspective. And these kind of things, we don't know. And I'll let you speak to this, Matt, because you have so much experience. I know ever since Columbine, right? You've had a lot of this training, but we don't know what's being orchestrated, what's not, what's being manipulated, what's being shown on purpose and used to weaponize against the public. But you probably know, watching that, you can invest, because if you invest in this one, then there's tomorrow, then there's the next day, and that news cycle is going to continue showing you that same story over and over as many times as possible to keep you down in that low vibration. And when you're down there, you can't serve humanity.
Yeah, there's definitely a compartmentalization that happens in my life. Can't tell how many kids I've seen dead, and dead people in general. That you can't own each one of those losses, and you can't mourn each one of them, and you can't empathize with each one of them in the level that maybe someone who has only seen one in their lifetime would. So there's definitely compartmentalization. And then when it comes to things like the mass shooting yesterday and any other mass shooting, the realities and what the media shows are two different things.
Yeah.
I've been training law enforcement on first responders. So the first cop on scene in that incident allegedly was shot and killed as soon as he arrived on scene. I don't know the details. I don't know whether he was shot in the building or when his car pulled up, or I don't know. But law enforcement since Columbine has been trained that the first 4 guys that show up on scene, 3, if that's all you have, go in, and there's techniques and tactics that you use to clear a building in order to stop the threat. And you use a lot of your intelligence that you gather outside, coming in from phone calls to 911 or whatever. But when you get there, if somebody says, "Oh, they're shooting at the front of the store," and you arrive 4 minutes later, well, odds are he's not still shooting at the front of the store, right? So you got to use all your senses. You got to use people running out, screaming, "Oh my God, there's a gunman! Where is he? Where did you last see him?" Blah, 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 blah. And then you're hearing gunshots, and you're trying to make assessments on what's the best way to enter a building and which direction do I go when I'm in there? Like all those things and there's chaos. And that's the thing that, when I saw a couple of videos that came out, one with the guy with the cell phone, I don't know if it was Eric or whoever in our group that posted that, and that something about his intonation and his words that he used, which in a heightened state of fear and excitement would sound completely different coming out of his mouth and more authentic than what they did. And his, anytime someone says you have to dial 911 or we need 911 out here, and they're not dialing 911, then the threat level's not that fucking bad. Right. So and the things he was shooting video of, I don't know whether or not this was a minute, was he a store employee? Was he 3 stores down? And they hadn't cordoned off the scene yet, and it was already over, and he's now acting as if he was present for the whole fucking thing. Like, there's a whole lot of different motivations that come from people who are eyewitnesses and people that are the ones that speak to the news. If you look at the events that happened January 6th in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, the one guy who was the medic inside the area where the girl was shot was interviewed when he came outside, and his interview was not authentic to what happened. His accounts of what happened and the way he said it did not match what was shown on the video of what he was supposedly doing in there.
Right.
So there was something that was completely off about him. I don't know whether he was a role player, whether or not he was just some guy that is trying to make a name for himself or be insta famous or whatever the case might be. Right. It just wasn't. It didn't ring true. Right. There's plenty of. I've interviewed people who have killed people. I have interviewed people who have raped children. I've interviewed family members and people that knew about it, and even the people that were not directly involved, like a next door neighbor that didn't see anything happen, only knew of the event. Their level of anxiety and stress was higher than somebody who just witnessed 10 people get shot and killed. Right. So there are certain things that, and then there was an interview also from a news person interviewing a guy, and he had to interject the gun violence and gun laws. That was a plan. That's not somebody who had anything to do with anything. Right. Whether he has an axe to grind against guns or was told to say that, regardless of the fact, his involvement was out here. He didn't have any direct visuals, incidents, involvement, nothing with what happened. He was just offering an opinion to get on TV. But that's what the media is going to show you. Right. Yeah. And that's the thing that they want you to see. What I would rather them show, and this is the twisted, fucked up side of being a cop, I would rather see the live video footage from the CCTV shown in audio and video. So people can truly see what evil and fear looks like.
Right.
Yep. That's right.
Well, because from your experience, when your life is in immediate jeopardy, is your number one priority to make sure you get the cell phone footage of what's going on? Usually?
Never. Never once.
That's where I question it, because I've been in that experience once. We were at a nightclub and there were shootings. This is before cell phones, but because I don't want to judge. I don't know what I would do in that situation. But I know when I was in that situation before cell phones, we were all running out the door. When you hear bullets whizzing by your head, you run. I mean, unless I'm wrong, I don't know. But to stand there and like grab your phone and like be, oh, look in there.
Right.
It just seemed a little inauthentic to me. I mean, when you're in that state, you're not really thinking with reason. You're running, fight or flight, right?
Well, there are three things that happen in that environment. So you have every person will fall back on what they've seen and known and experienced, right? That's how your decision making is based on 99% of the time, and then it's all of that, and then what you're seeing determines how you react. And 65-70% of the people that are involved in a situation like that are losing their fucking shit, right? They're going fucking ape shit, running into each other, running over each other. Everybody wants to get out because that fight or flight is real, and they just are fuck it, I'm flight, right? I'm out. Then you have probably 38% of the people are like stage fright, like catatonic, like what the fuck just happened, and can't move because like fear is so right. And then you have the small fraction of people that, somebody came back from combat, or somebody who's in law enforcement, or somebody was a member of a gang that was involved in a shit ton of fucked up shit. Whatever your life experience that was chaos driven, they're in that 2% that can make conscientious thought, logical, whether it's logical meaning I'm going to go kill that motherfucker, or logical meaning I'm going to hunker down and hide and visualize and be a good witness. Yeah, but making decisions in the moment.
Right.
That's a very, very
make a conscious decision. Right.
Right. And that's that logical conscious decision component. It's either get the fuck out, freeze, or I'm going to stay and I'm going to take some sort of an action that I've thought out and based on my experiences, the right decision at this time. And that's such a small number of people in a civilian population,
Right.
in that environment. So, I work in a world of plausible and probable, right? Plausible is something that could, but the odds are it's not. Probable is, very well might be, but I haven't proven it yet. And I always put things in those two boxes because nothing is fact until it's vetted out and proven to be so. And everything we're seeing in the world, everybody wants to take as fact.
Yep.
Every rabbit hole, every video, every picture, we're in a hologram, whatever. Everybody takes everything as fact because they saw it.
Right.
And they're not working through the logical progressions of, and somebody put out, I don't know if you, Aaron, or not in the group, that, if that hologram, if we're getting that hologram on basic Google searches, they want us to get that hologram.
Accidents on purpose. This is how they operate. It's all accidents on purpose. You think, how many Marvel movies have you guys seen? Have you ever seen an accident with the green screen?
No.
Come on. You think this is by accident? They want to implement this technology. This is how they do it. And then they get everybody up in arms to go, look, you can see his hand in the microphone, right? And then eventually they'll show that a few times. Then it'll get to the point where people just accept it and go, look, the green screen glitched. And now we are accepting this as our reality. But it doesn't matter which rabbit hole you go down, what you want. If you want it to be true, you will believe it as true. So no matter what side you're on or what you're looking at, you have to use discernment and remember that all sides of this thing have the same technology, the same editors, the same capabilities as everyone else. So you got to be careful what you want to be true.
And I think when it comes to just, we'll go back to the topic, decoding human behavior. That's what what you guys have done brilliantly. And what I've been trying to do with my group is to get them to ask all the questions. But at some point in time, you got to stop asking questions and then start making decisions, right?
Yes, so, that's where I'm at now.
And people still want to, because they want to find the answer that fits but they want the truth to be in their head rather than taking all the information that's provided. And that's what, human behavior is taking all the environmental, the timing, the where are you, the what have you done in your life, like what is the factors involved in the incident, is it a domestic, and like whatever, like taking all of those factors in to come up with an evaluation and analysis of what you're seeing. That's what this process for me has been, is to get people to work through those processes. But now it's that shifting from digger to doer.
Yes. Don't go all in. Don't plateau. These are steps in the ascension process, right? And there's some people out there with some really good truther stuff. But if you go all in there, you'll get lost in that rabbit hole. You have to just take a step, learn and create your own understanding. And then what do you do with it? So I've been having this conversation a lot for the past few months now, because I've been, quietly paying attention to everything for 15 years, especially the past few years after I got to run around in the medical stuff, to start asking how it served me and what did I need to do to move through, right? But there's a lot of, and it's important to do this, who, what, where, why, when, right? I'm at the point now, and I think we all have to be, because here we are. Whether you've done the research or not leading up to this, we're at the point now where the only question that really, really matters is why. Nothing else matters. The why matters. Why is this happening? Why are they doing this to humanity? It's because we are more powerful than we've ever been told. And if we discover that, we can no longer be controlled. They can no longer sell you things you don't need. They can no longer have you do things that don't resonate within your body. Because when you are a sovereign being, you cannot be controlled. When you understand emotional intelligence, critical thinking, discernment for yourself, it's much harder to sell you things you don't need and to tell you to do something that you don't want to do, that you don't know to be true in your heart.
That's right.
And it's fine. One person pops out, the other person pops out, whatever. But as a collective, we are starting to come to this understanding that we are powerful beyond measure.
Mm.
And we haven't even scratched the surface of discovering what that means. And once we do, I mean, you saw what I've been through. And when I was able to heal my body with my mind, I went, whoa, I'm nothing special. This is not a miracle. I don't think a miracle is what we've been told. It's this small, unique, isolated incident. I think miracles can happen all day, every day, but we just don't believe them yet. And when you're put in a position where you're forced to see it,
yeah,
you'll never unsee it. You can never go back. And that's what they're scrambling to avoid. They don't want people to find out how powerful they are. So just ask why at this point. And when you viscerally understand your own power, you cannot be controlled anymore.
That's right. Beautiful. I'm so glad he came on, Matt. I love you, and I'm thankful for you, brother. And this is such a awesome time. It's such an awesome time.
We should do this all the time, like every day. Like, fuck it, I'm gonna quit my job. But 2 hours a day talking about life.
We definitely have to have you as a regular guest because I feel like we never even scratched the surface with your experience, and we're gonna want to have you back regularly.
And I appreciate, Matt, how I don't always meet people on inauguration day, but when I do, I want it to be you. we met talking about the stuff. I just love it, and
Aaron sends me a text and he's like, yo, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. He's like, here's the link, hop on. I'm like, what?
Dude.
I'm like, Lucas, I have a surprise for you. Oh, that's cool. No, but it's coming in 5 seconds.
It was so
I do it every once in a while. I just did it for Friday too, for our guest, which Matt, I think you're going to love this guy, but
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on, and everyone watching, thank you. Make sure, if you haven't yet, sign up for Aaron and I's class that's taking place this Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon Pacific. It's about reclaiming your divine sovereignty, how to do it, what does sovereignty mean, why, what Matt, Aaron, and I just went through and talked about without getting triggered and not trying to puff up our chest or get angry. Or this is sovereignty in play. When you get to see that, I'm not sure we all three could disagree and we'd all still love each other, and there would be no question about that, because we're not questioning our own soul and our own body. So if you're struggling right now, if you're looking for some soul freedom, liberation, or even figuring out what this word sovereignty really means, sign up for this class this Saturday. There's a link in the bio or a link in the wall, and Aaron put it in there earlier today. We'll make sure we put it on this live. But everyone, thanks for watching, and we love you, and we'll talk to you on the next live.